that are newer here at our church, this is Brother Johnny Funderburg, who was the pastor here at First Baptist Church Pampa for lots of years. You know what years? No, this is fine. And he was my immediate predecessor before coming. And you know, when you follow it here, I'll let you hold this for now. I got mine on. You hear me? Maybe you can hear me. Maybe if I turned it off mute, that'd be better. So if you didn't get the memo, by the way, this is not about Johnny, but some of our men said that on the last Sunday of the month this summer, the men need to wear Hawaiian shirts. And so if you see guys with Hawaiian shirts, that's what it's all about. We got one guy that apparently came in out of Jimmy Buffett's band over here that's playing on the drums. But whenever you go to pastor a church, serve on staff, whatever, you always hear stories about the previous guy. And, you know, some of those stories you have to take with a grain of salt, and you say, that can't be true. You know, none of these things, all these things can't be true. Well, there's one story in particular I heard about Johnny Funderburg, and I thought, surely that's not true. And then after I met him, I thought, it's absolutely true. Let me share. I mean, it's just the depth of this dear brother pastor here. He was preaching a sermon, and several of the ladies in the office have shared this with me a number of times over the years. He was preaching a funeral service for an individual and kept talking about how this individual was blind and couldn't see, and just went on and kept referring back to that over the course of the message. And I think it was Brenda Kondo and Roxanne were in the back, and they kept pointing to their ears, and so Johnny just got louder and louder. So he thought, they can't hear. Well, come to find out, the man who died was not blind, but he was deaf. And so Johnny cast the wrong affliction on this poor gentleman who was gone. Is that right? True story. Is that a true story? Y'all remember that? True story. So then after I met him, I thought, it's absolutely true, because we're here and we're getting ready for Miss Lindell Hatcher's memorial service here at the church. Roxanne's mother, and Lindell's this precious saint of God who'd been a part of this church for so many years, and we're ready. We got people coming in, and that day we had 2 different funeral services here in the life of our church family, and 2 meals going on at the same time. It was just busy up here. And Johnny comes rushing in. He was co-officiating the service with me, and he comes rushing in. He hits the door. He's like, I forgot my Bible. And I thought, yep, that's the same guy they told me about that preached to the other deal. And then he gets up here to preach, and we're seated up front. Do you remember this? We're seated up front. And he was doing the first part of the service where you typically will read the obituary and share the personal remarks, because he had known her for a lot more years than I had at that point. And I was sharing the message at the end, and Johnny opens up the obituary that the funeral directors had handed him, and it says Lindell Hatcher on the outside, but when he opened it up, it was for the wrong person. True story. And so Johnny just quietly looks over at me, and he stands up and he walks out the side door. I'm like, what's going on? And he said, wrong obituary. And so the funeral directors hightailed it out of here, drove down the street, reprinted it because they'd got the name on the outside wrong, whoever's doing it, and brought it back, run it into Johnny right on time so that he could read the correct obituary. In the meanwhile, I'm pulling up my phone. They have these things called the internet now that's newer, you know, and the obituary's right here on my phone. I'm like, Johnny, you could have just asked me. And it's like, right here, we can help you out. So all the stories I heard about him, I thought, they're absolutely true, aren't they? Well, it is a privilege. It's a privilege to serve in ministry. It's a joy and an honor, and sometimes a challenge to pastor a church. And so just know I have tremendous appreciation for those that have gone before me here in this place. I want you to welcome today Brother Johnny Funderburg as he shares with us. So give him a warm welcome to share with us here at our church. Thank you, Love you.
Thank you so much. By the way, none of that stuff was true. I I haven't made a lot of good friends in the ministry over the years, and that says more about me than it does anyone. Thank you. Thank you. But I tell you, Byron and I have become friends. I love and respect this guy. He not only the joy and the humor that he has in his heart, but he ministered deeply to Pam and me while we were in the hospital. And he is top notch. I've heard him speak. He's a wonderful preacher. And I know you're blessed to have him here as your pastor. Was that all? He said he'd buy me lunch if I said those things. On January 25th of this year, I had my 10th spine surgery. And I was getting over it, doing fine, just like I've done all the rest of them. But I started getting really sick at one point, and I had a doctor's appointment, and my daughter came and got me to take me, and they put me immediately in the hospital. There was an abscess that had taken root where they did the surgery. So the next morning after I go in the hospital, they do the surgery. And then the next day, I'm awake trying to kind of clue into what's going on. And my son and daughter have come down. And my son comes to tell me that my wife has a malignant brain tumor that they've just found. Pam had been feeling poorly over the past probably month or so, having headaches and nausea and exhaustion. And while they were at the hospital at BSA, while I was having the surgery, they put Pam in through the ER, and that's where they found the brain tumor. So she and I were in the hospital for about 3 weeks. And our son lives in Dallas. By the way, our son Ryan and Lizzie are here, and our daughter Kristen and her husband Seth are here, and all the little ones are in the nursery. But short story of it is they found this tumor, and Ryan got Pam into UT Southwestern in Dallas, where he lives. And so she went to Dallas to go to UT Southwestern and take radiation and chemo. And I went to live with my daughter for quite a while, and so several months. And so just these past couple of weeks, Pam and I have gotten to be back together again and spend some time together there in our home at Clovis. But trials can be overwhelming, and they can come in a start. Trials can make us question our faith. They can cause us to go into depression. Trials can hurt us deeply. Maybe you've heard of the old football coach Newt Rockne. Well, the story is that while he was at Notre Dame, they went to play a better team at USC, University of Southern California. USC was coming to Notre Dame to play, and Rockne knew that they had a better team than did Notre Dame. And so the coaches were trying to come up with strategies and ways, things they could do to try to offset this better team. Finally, they decided. And Rockne had all of his coaches go through and search the College of Notre Dame to find the biggest kids they could find there. Didn't matter if they were muscular. It didn't matter what their shape was like. As long as they were big, he got them. And so they took all these 300-pounders and suited them up on game day. USC is out on the field. Notre Dame's about to come out on the field. And Rockney put all of those big 300-pounders up at front. They all ran out first, and the regular team kind of hid behind them. And it was said that the USC coach was running up and down the sideline saying they can only put 11 of them out there at one time. They can only put 11 at one time. And the thing is about that game, Notre Dame won. The better team, USC, lost. Because it got into their heads at the very beginning that they were so powerful, so overwhelming, so big that they couldn't defeat them. And Satan loves to do that to us, to create in us a hopelessness, that things are not going to go right, that God is not walking with me and strengthening me. I want us to look this morning for just a few minutes at some truths that can help us to battle against trial. Now, I don't know where you are in life right now, but it's likely that you're either at the beginning of a trial, in the middle of the trial, or at the end of a trial. And some trials are huge. Some loom so large before us. And others are smaller. But yet it doesn't matter. Trials can hurt us very deeply. 1 Peter chapter 1, let me read verses 3 through 7. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his abundant mercy has begotten us again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled that does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you who are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. This is our hope. This is our strength. This is where we dig in our heels. And then he goes on to say in verse 6, in this truth, you greatly rejoice, though now, for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials. And that word grieved means to feel bad. It means to be overwhelmed. It means to be carrying a burden that's too heavy. That trials have the power to grieve us. There are a couple of promises that we find in this passage about trial that I think can help us as we live our lives. The first one, in fact, both of them are found in little short phrases in this passage in verse 7. The two phrases are these, now for a little while, and if need be. Now for a little while. That's telling us that our trial has a time schedule. There's a beginning of suffering, there's a middle of suffering, and there's an end to the suffering. He says, for a little while. Though for a little while you may walk through the valley of affliction, for the time being you may carry an extra burden. For a temporary season, you may encounter problems and circumstances and situations that run against you for a while. One writer has said this, when we are in the midst of trial, God has his hands on the thermostat to control the temperature and his eyes on the clock to know when it ends. for the time being, for a little while, you may suffer, be grieved through these trials. But listen to what he says then in chapter 5 in verse 10 as Peter kind of concludes his thinking and talk about trial. He says in verse 10 of chapter 5, first in verse 9, he says, resist the devil, steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood in the world. He says then, but may the God of all grace, now listen closely, may the God of all grace, who has called us to his eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after you have suffered a little while, he will perfect you, he will establish you, he will strengthen you, he will settle you. That term perfect means to restore. It means to be fit. It means that everything is in its proper order. After you have suffered a little while, God is going to put everything back to its proper order. Establish means to strengthen and confirm, to prop up. It comes from a word that means to prop up. After a little while, God is going to prop you up. To strengthen, to build up, to give energy is going to infuse energy and settle you. It means to stand upon a foundation. The idea is, and I won't be moved. After a little while. After a little while, he will make things right. After a little while, he will build in you a victorious faith that will take down the trial. Secondly, if need be, though now for a little while, if need be. Trial speaks to our need. Trials are not just accidents, inadvertent problems, promises. God's promise to us is that he determines the need, and he gives us a why and a when for the need, and he walks with us through that trial. I can know, therefore, that when a trial comes, it's no simple mishap, mistake, but it's divinely ordered and sovereignly allowed. The trial has been carefully designed, appropriately weighed, supernaturally measured, so that nothing is put on me more than I can bear. Though now for a little while, if need be. And then the purpose of the trial is found in verse 7. That's a genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes. Though it's tested by fire, it may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Folks, the purpose of trial in its clearest form, the purpose of trial is to prove our faith. It's not just to test our faith. It's not just a trial to make us upset, to leave us anxious through the day. What will happen on the other side of trial? You will find that God has spoken to you and proved to you the depth of faith that you have. That's his intent. It's for our good. James says in chapter 1, verse 2, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, because knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, and let patience have its perfect work, that you may be, and here are those words again, perfect, complete, lacking nothing. That in the end, God is going to prop you up and he's going to set all things in order. In his book, In the Eye of the Storm, Max Lucado, in commenting on trials in our life, writes these words. He says, there is a window in your heart through which you can see God. Once upon a time, that window was clear. Your view of God was crisp. You could see God as vividly as you could see a gentle valley or a hillside. The glass was clean, the pane unbroken. You knew God. You knew how he worked. Lost my place. You knew how he worked. You knew what he wanted you to do. No surprises, nothing unexpected. You knew that God had a will for you, and you were continually discovering what that will was. But then suddenly, the window cracked, broken by a pebble of pain. Perhaps the stone struck your heart when you were a child and a parent left home forever. Maybe the rock hit in adolescence when your heart was broken. Maybe you made it into adulthood before the window cracked, but the pebble came. Suddenly, God was not so easy to see. The view that had been so crisp had changed. You turned to see God and the figure was distorted. It was hard to see him through the pain. It was hard to see him through the fragments of hurt. You were puzzled. God wouldn't let something like this happen to you, would he? Tragedy and travesty were not on the agenda of God that you had seen before. What happened? Had you been fooled? Had you been blind? The moment that pebble struck, the glass became a reference point for you. From then on, there was life before the pain and life after the pain. Before the pain, the view was clear. God seemed so close. But now after your pain, he's harder to see, a bit distant. Your pain distorted the view, not eclipsed it, but certainly distorted it. Again, you may be here this morning and you're walking through fire. Maybe you're struggling inwardly and no one else knows. But the pain in your heart is very real. And it's creating a problem in your relationship with God. It's creating a problem in your relationship with others. That pebble broke the glass. And it's hard to see him. It's hard to sense him. Hard to feel him. So what do you do when you're too far away to see someone? You get closer. You walk closer. I want to encourage you to do that this morning. To let your heart be broken before God. And to let him cleanse and fill and forgive and restore and put everything back in its proper order. Thank you. God bless you.